Hello, my name is Amy and today I am going to be talking to you about two different grapes used for the production of white wine, both of which are relative powerhouses within the wine industry for their versatility and the different styles they're able to produce. The first is a green grape of French origin, but produced all over the world in a huge number of styles. And the second grape is more of a grey grape. It's actually a mutation of Pinot Noir, also grown internationally, but probably more known for its production in Italy, New Zealand, Alsace, and Oregon. If you haven't already guessed, it is of course Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio. So let's start with Chardonnay. As I mentioned, it has French origins. It actually is named after a village in southern Burgundy in the Macon district called Chardonnay. It's definitely one of the world's most distributed grapes, probably one of the world's most planted, and possibly one of the world's most drunk too. In fact, it actually accounts for around 160,000 hectares of vines across the globe. That's just under 400,000 acres. And 44,000 of those hectares, so 108,000 acres, are planted in California alone. So how did this French vine end up in the United States? Well, it was actually a German immigrant, Carl Venti, who brought the vines over from Burgundy in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was actually studying enology under Charles Krug in the Napa Valley, and after his studies were done, he very humbly purchased a few acres of vineyards and began to plant his own vines. When his sons got involved in the family business, they convinced him to start bringing over Chardonnay vines from Montpellier University and begin planting in the United States. So together with the Chardonnay budwood that was already in Napa, this is what they did for the next 30 to 40 years. They planted Chardonnay across California. And just to give you an idea, in 1941, there were about 100 acres of Chardonnay in California. Today, there's probably around some 100,000 acres of Chardonnay. So huge impact this one guy and his family had on Chardonnay production. And the clone that they brought over and began to plant and replant is actually still known as the Venti clone. In the States, certainly, this Chardonnay is one of the top selling wines of red or white, and it is said that Americans alone drink about 840,000 bottles of Chardonnay a year. So cheers to that. However, I mentioned that Chardonnay originated in France, and in fact, this is where it holds one of its flagship styles. Burgundy in France produces some of the finest white wine in the world made from the Chardonnay grape. Just above Burgundy, you have Champagne to the northeast, which is of course some of the finest sparkling wine in the world, also made from the Chardonnay grape. In New World countries, we can talk about places like Western Australia, Perth, Margaret River, Yarra Valley, who are now producing very, very fine Chardonnays as well, of course with far more tropical fruits in them due to the increase in temperature in those parts of the world. And of course, we have our Napa and Sonoma Valley as well, who are real key producers in terms of this grape. So what does it taste like in the different parts of the world? Well, Chardonnay is what we'd typically term a non-aromatic grape. It is an incredibly commercially viable wine. Its lesser acidity and kind of higher alcohol volume makes it a great crowd pleaser, as well as the huge number of different styles that it can produce. You can usually find a Chardonnay for every single palate. We know it can be planted almost anywhere, and that makes it a great favourite of producers as well. But what does it taste like in these flagship areas where it's planted. Let's begin with Burgundy. The rich limestone soils found in Burgundy and the cool temperatures mean that characteristically Chardonnay from this area can range from anything from steely and mineral-driven texture with kind of lime zest and citrus in places like Chablis, unoaked, or buttery richness with hazelnut and lemon and nut in general from Premier and Grand Cru examples of this same grape in the same region. In Western Australia, you can expect more tropical fruits. Remember, we're in a much hotter part of the world down there. Pineapple, honeysuckle, vanilla, orange citrus, and if it's undergone malolactic fermentation, some beautiful creaminess too. Generally, they tend to be much more full-bodied from this part of the world. And in California, particularly areas like Santa Barbara or Carneros, which cuts, of course, Napa and Sonoma, you can expect tropical fruit, green apples, pineapple. If the Chardonnay has been oaked, there's usually some sweet spice there added to the mix as well. Really, really good examples of what Chardonnay can produce. Which is best, like everything in wine, is merely a matter of taste. If you prefer more citrus, zesty wines, I would head for Old World Chardonnay in high altitude areas. If you like yellow fruit, yellow apples, tropical fruit, then Margaret River is fantastic. And Napa and Sonoma are producing some excellent, very elegant versions of Chardonnay that almost cross these two barriers as well. My advice would be to try as many styles as possible. Some styles will cost you a lot more money than others, but share with friends and try and determine what it is that your palate likes and take it from there. I will actually be trying this Australian Chardonnay this afternoon, and it's Penfolds. They're an incredibly classic winery. They're known for their superb wines, and I'm expecting tropical fruits. I'm expecting orange citrus. There's a little bit of oak in there as well, so there will be some creaminess, but a full-bodied mouthful of great Chardonnay goodness. So let's move on to our second grape, Pinot Grigio, which has almost as many styles as it does synonyms. To set the record straight from the beginning, Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris are the same grape. It can also be known as Grauburgunder in Germany, Rolander in Austria and Romania, Tokai, not to be confused with the Tokai of Hungary, and very simply put, the style of the wine tends to determine what the producers put on the label. Gris or Grigio means grey, and I mentioned before this is a mutation of the Pinot Noir grape, and the grape itself is a very sort of light grey, bluish hue to it that doesn't impart much colour to the wine, but very occasionally the wines made from this grape can have a slight pink hue in the glass. How did it move around so much and where does it come from? Well, I mentioned it was French, originating again from Burgundy, that fantastic wine region. It was thought to be a favourite grape of the Emperor Charles IV, who actually moved cuttings from Burgundy over to Switzerland in the 1300s. And from there it travelled to Hungary and Germany, and it wasn't until 1961 that an Italian group, the Santa Margherita wine group, actually began vinifying for the first time Pinot Gris as a white wine. The first American vineyards of Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, were then planted in 1966 by Erie Vineyards, and it was probably in around the early 2000s that Pinot Grigio really started to become a huge marketing success. There are currently just over 70,000 acres of Pinot Grigio planted internationally, with 25,000 of those in Italy, 16,000 of those in the States, and the rest spread out between France, New Zealand, and just smaller wine regions. Now, I mentioned it was a huge marketing success, and there was rather a lot of bulk Pinot Grigio that was exported from Italy into mass supermarkets, certainly across Europe and the UK. And this kind of gave consumers the impression that the grape was a little bit bland, perhaps, very easy to drink, but not huge amounts of personality. While that may be true for more economical versions of Pinot Grigio, there are in fact some fabulous examples made in the northern parts of Italy. So vineyards that are next to the Alps, they have altitude, they've got freshness, they've got acidity, and they produce this really very tasty, mineral-driven, fruity example of Pinot Grigio. Similar styles to this Lombardy and Trentino examples can also be found in places like Hungary, Austria, Romania, the Pfalz in Germany, and across Northern Europe. It generally doesn't undergo any oak aging, and it doesn't need to. It's not pretending to be something or trying to be something super complex. It is really, its advantage is being able to produce these zesty, really refreshing white wines. There are some producers, particularly in Oregon, experimenting with malolactic fermentation and slight amounts of wood, but in general it is a wine that is to be drunk young and doesn't usually undergo any oak aging. So if Northern Italian and Northern European Pinot is about biting acidity and freshness and crispness, New World Pinot Grigio tends to be far more fruit forward. Even warmer parts of Italy, so Tuscany and Sicily, are aiming towards producing this style as well, which will have notes of peach and lemon and more tropical flavours, with a creamier mouthfeel and a kind of richness to the palate. And in Alsace, it's typically known for its much more fruitier and sweet style, although they are producing some delicious dry versions as well, and has this very elegant honeyed and crisp apple and lemon curd characteristic to it too. Which is better? Well, similar to the Chardonnay options that you can try, this is all about determining and defining your own palate. And again, I would encourage anyone to try as many different versions of Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris as they possibly can. I often find with this grape, it comes down more to an occasional bias. So for me, for example, I love an Italian crisp Pinot Grigio if I'm not planning on eating with my wine or eating anything big with my wine. And I might opt for an Alsace as a replacement to a dessert wine perhaps, or with some cheese. And the more fruit-forward, warmer climate versions, I would probably pair with pasta or white meat or fish or a salad of some sort as well. I hope this has been helpful and you've enjoyed learning a little bit about these two grapes. And I have a delicious Italian Pinot Grigio awaiting me for later, probably as more of an aperitif, to be honest. And I know it's full of lemon and crisp apples and will be perfect as a pre-dinner drink. So on that note, cheers, and I hope you've had some kind of takeaway. I hope you've learned a little bit more about these two grapes, and go and try. Wine is all about discovering. On that note, cheers until the next time.